smothering the sky like a death wound under white linen. This telling of history from your too late perspective creates a bubble in my mind that I cannot identify until it bursts in my mouth into incredulous laughter. You say you are shocked by the cruelty, but this is how it has always been for us. Your Tulsa is not my Tulsa. Do you think we have always walked with downcast eyes, heads drooping on our shoulders, and rounded backbones like wilted tulips, speaking in hushed, inoffensive tones so as not to be judged ripe for the noose? This was the lesson our grandmothers taught us, the lesson they learned from your grandfathers. So now, when you have accepted the truth of the massacre called riot, you wonder why I am unimpressed by your outrage at men who were the children of Indian murderers and slave rapists, born in a country that debates the worth of a black skin against the worth of a brown skin, against the worth of a red skin, against the worth of a yellow skin, while the scales are weighted in favor of the white skin. And how you cannot believe your own grandfather committed this small act of terrorism when it was his great-grandfather who auctioned black flesh, his grandfather who engineered the Trail of Tears, his father who rushed to claim stolen promised land. It was your grandfather standing in the back of a pickup truck holding a Molotov cocktail. It was my grandmother hiding in her own house who, a millisecond before she fled the flames of Greenwood, saw the gleeful malice dancing in his eyes as the match flared.
Yeah. I've asked my friend Marcia Francine Eshdie to help. When I read the word silence in the title that our artists have chosen, I thought of a poem that I'm going to read. They also said they wanted less of a panel discussion than an artist talk, so I'm going to read this for 3 minutes and get out of the way and let the artist talk. But part of this poem is by Barago Diop. He was Senegalese, who was trained in France as a veterinarian, who helped in a movement in the early part of the century called the Negritude movement, and it was about taking indigenous African things back. And so I want to start with something indigenously African, which is a pour into the libation to the ancestors while I read this poem. The appropriate response to this, if you think of names of the dead who are not dead, while I'm reading it, you may call them internally or externally, but the appropriate response after it's done is silence, which is a part of what we do here tonight. The poem is called Breath. Listen to things more often than beings. Hear the voice of fire. Hear the voice of water. Listen in the wind to the sigh of the bush. This is the ancestors breathing. The ancestors who have not gone away, who are not under the earth, who are not really dead. Those who are dead are not ever gone. They are in the woman's breast, in the wailing of the child, in the burning of the log, in the moaning rock and in the weeping grasses, in the forest and in the home. The dead are not dead. Listen to things more often than beings. Hear the voice of fire. Hear the voice of water. Listen in the wind to the bush that is sobbing. This is the ancestors breathing. Each day, they renew ancient bonds that hold fast, binding our lot to their law, to the will of the spirits stronger than we, to the spell of the dead who are not really dead, whose covenant binds us to life, whose authority binds to their will, to the will of the spirits that stir in the bed of the river, on the banks of the river, the breathing of spirits who moan in the rocks and weep in the grasses. Spirits inhabit the darkness that lightens, the darkness that darkens, the quivering tree and the murmuring wood, the water that runs and the water that sleeps. Spirits much stronger than we. The breathing of the dead who are not really dead, of the dead who are not really gone, of the dead now no more in the earth. Listen to things more often than beings. Hear the voice of fire. Hear the voice of water. Listen in the wind to the bush that is silent. This is the ancestors breathing. Thanksgiving for the great cloud of witness who are with us now.
My name is Keir Johnston, and I am a Philadelphia-based artist, based mostly in public art, but also an educator. And, you know, in the practice of public art, you go through many evolutions. And most of that is based in interaction and engagement and collaboration with communities. And that is something that you constantly have to improve upon yourself in the process. You constantly have to be innovative and constantly have to reach out as a point of collaboration, attainment of knowledge and information, and then incorporating that within the process of your work. And what that entails is that you look to make work that speaks on a number of things, but it speaks with the presence of the community and their involvement. And we were asked to come out here to do an artist in residence with Living Arts. We applied for it, and we were asked to do a project based on the history of Dreamland. And you learn what you can from afar, but then you come here and you learn what you learned is not even an inkling of what you possibly could have learned somewhere else. And then you learn that 3 weeks is no time at all. And to come out here and to embrace this history and embrace this subject matter as a point of creativity within such a limited time. The only thing that you wish you could have had is more time. So coming out here, when we first got here, what we first did was really just do nonstop research and talking. This was never our story to tell, and we wanted to at least get a grasp of the history, of the information, of the people involved in the community before we even started a point of creation. And with that, we did about 2 weeks of straight all-day research before we even thought about doing it. We learned the confines of the community. We learned the events and the strategic locations that were incorporated in the events. We learned about the build-up to the events, but then not only just focusing on the negative, we learned about the affluence and the vibrancy and the resiliency to rebuild against all struggles when a lot of comparable communities chose not to. And there's been a powerful chain of activities, and we've met some amazing people. We've completely embraced Tulsa, and really have taken it as a blessing in terms of our experience here. And the work that you see as a result is what I would say is our response, in the time that we had.
My name is Ernell Martinez. I'm a co-member of Ambar Design. I've been Tulsa for a week. And I've been blown away and humbled by the experience and about what I've learned to this point. And I've done some research prior to coming out here, but like Kier said, it doesn't resonate to actually talk to people. And at the end of the day, for me, a large part of the art making process is speaking to people, engaging people in conversation, and trying to learn. And so for the last week or so, it's all been about learning for me. And I'd like to take a second to thank Steve and Living Arts for opening the opportunity to even have this happen, further this conversation, this dialogue here in Tulsa. And I'd like to thank all the panelists here for their participation in this conversation, of course. My two colleagues here from Philly, and everybody here tonight. I appreciate you guys coming out, support the show, support this exhibition, and partaking in this whole experience. It's been quite a wonderful opportunity for us as a collective, and hopefully you guys will enjoy the show, enjoy each other, and everything that happens.
My name is Linda Fernandez. I'm a multidisciplinary artist and also a community artist. I do a lot of community engagement work in Philadelphia, bringing art making into communities that don't have access to art facilities. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about being here is the way that people have welcomed us and shared their stories with us in just a very beautiful way. I'm very grateful for everybody who's here, everybody who's talked with us, greeted us, met with us, engaged with us in some way. And just being able to be a part of the history, be a part of the arts that are happening in Tulsa, and be a part of the conversations that are happening.
I'm Leroy Chapman, and I'm a history recovery specialist. And thank you, Steve, for bringing the Philly crew here and the art collective. And thank you all for inviting me up here to participate. Enough about me. This is really about you, so.
I'm your Bonzi Charles Johnson, and as I said before, I'm getting out of the way.
Well, I would just say that, many, many thanks again to Living Arts, and in particular Steve and Shinsuke. They've really been very accommodating to our time here. We invited Yobanzi to be up here with us because he's been kind of like our social mentor while we've been here. I don't like to encapsulate things into one statement to what the influence has been, but he's guided us to at least our first day here. We went to the Church of Restoration and went on a march down Greenwood, and it was as good of an introduction as we possibly could have had on the anniversary, and in a Yoruba tradition with drumming and spiritual presence. Ubanzi has been a large influence in our creative process, as well as Leroy Chapman, whose articles are telling and soaked in truth and sincerity. And I really feel that has renewed a conversation that is needed within the community, and something that people like to stand off with a hands-off kind of approach sometimes. I've never thought that that's the right way to a true resolution. If something has never really been resolved, I think the more that you speak on it, the more that you bring people to a table, address it, and talk about history and talk about presence, the more that you get to a point where people feel that the history is known, and then you could at least have a point of growing from there. To say the least, to come into a town that's foreign to you and creatively address the stickiest historical incident in the history is, you know, a challenge that most would not be willing to take. You know, we were willing to take it, and, you know, we were honored to be given the opportunity, but it still didn't make that acceptance easy. You know, hearing from people and their personal history was not an easy process for us. I will say, coming out of town, we didn't have an emotional attachment that some might have if they grew up within a neighborhood, or they were on either side of the fence, or they had a history involved, maybe negative or positive, in the breaching of the subject matter. So us coming with foreign eyes and ears, I think at least allowed us to have a process that was rooted in the root of creativity, which is truth. You know, I think art making is truth, and I think the fact that we were able to come here and just give it kind of like a reporter's eyes and be able to just take it all in and then go from there towards creativity, you know, was, as little as it can be said, a small degree of a strength in our part. But with that in mind, you know, there's resentment on all sides, you know, on us telling the story or the reality of us creating, you know, because it still seems to be a subject matter that has not been, properly resolved.
Yeah, and as an artist, you know, I wouldn't quite say that we're journalists. I think journalists need to be some objective to situations. When they travel and document something, there needs to be emotional distance between them and what's going on, so they can sort of be true to the art form. And you know, for me personally, it's been hard for me to not be affected by what I'm hearing. You know, it's just part of being human. You hear stories and it affects you one way or another. And so, without being too heavy-handed, I think the work speaks on some stuff, it touches on some stuff, it references some stuff, but it resonates inside the art. And you know, and instead of, you know, me personally being up here talking or us being up here talking, I'd love to open the floor for you guys to be involved with the conversation with us too, and ask questions. And I encourage you guys to, you know, hopefully you guys have seen all the work, and it might have interested you to some degree, and that, you know, you might have some questions for us. So at any time, I think throughout the show or throughout this conversation, you guys can ask questions.
And as a side note, if either you wanted to initiate conversation this way, in any way, or make a testament, a statement yourself, you know, that'd be an amazing thing.
And this young lady right here.
Could you talk a little bit about your how you found these places? And I've heard one story about you getting in the Arkansas, but just kind of the environment you were in to take these photos. How you found them, maybe? I know there were some bicycle trips that y'all went on.
Our conversations with people led us to the discovery of the different locations. So we would meet with somebody and they would talk a little bit about what they knew about history, and then, you know, we would say, okay, where is that? We want to go there, we want to check it out. We had been all over Greenwood. We had, you know, explored, and we thought we had done a lot of research, and then we were talking to somebody, and I asked, what would you want to see? You know, what kind of emotion do you want to see in the work? And she said, have you been to North Tulsa? And we said, you know, we haven't yet. We've just had bikes. We've just kind of explored Greenwood. She said, go to North Tulsa and just see, you know, just take it in, just go there. So we did. We rode our bikes all the way out to 86th Street, and then came back around this mountain and down, I guess, Cincinnati, and then it turns to MLK, and then it turns back to Cincinnati. So we really got to see and experience the landscape.
But a lot of it was based in research. We did a bike tour with Leroy, and you know, it was very informative, and you know, you could kind of pinpoint across the map whether you boil things down to the 2 days that seems to be a point of focus within the Greenwood history, or just the overall history of Greenwood. You know, what you do is you go and you get on foot, you get on bike, and you get in a car. When we went up to 86th Street, we zigzagged coming back, so you know, we got to go through the meat of a lot of neighborhoods. Then we zigzagged going south and east, and you know, it was really about learning the players involved, the locations, and kind of the history as much as we can. And again, I really want to stress that our time is limited while we were here, and then using that as a point of inspiration.
I mean, the work here is sort of a continuation of previous work that we've done as a collective. For the last 2 years, Kira and I, we've collaborated quite a bit. If you look over our shoulder, a lot of the stuff we're looking at is a previous project we did in North Philly. And the work here has sort of been a continuation of that. So it's been influenced, of course, by
So I want just looking at the photos that are on display. I wanted to ask you about your choice of attire and the rigidity and stoicism that you exhibit, and what you intend that to mean.
Well, the attire was meant to be a kind of a combinational response to the documentation of the time that we had seen. It seemed like at the time, and there's something to be said for that, and there's something that I've really been inspired by, and you can blame it on segregation or what, but there was an autonomy in Greenwood that a lot of black communities have not been able to replicate since. They talk about the dollar turning over. I've heard, everybody has their own story of things, but 8 to over 30 times depending on which dollar it is. And so with that, there was also stories of people only being able to leave Greenwood unless it was to work for probably an affluent situation that was not their own. So there was a reality in Greenwood, I think, that was a worker's reality, but then also an entrepreneur and business person's reality. So a lot of the footage that we saw from the time, we did a lot of research at OSU. We didn't get to go to TU as much, but there was the workers' attire that was either a lot of either jeans or overalls, and then there was the affluence attire that was like suited. It's like a lot of people judge you just the way the world works from what you wear and your physical makeup. So if what we tried to do is kind of combine them both, and have a testament of the affluence and a testament of the labor experience, and sandwich them into one outfit. And then the facial expressions and kind of our physical makeup within the photos, for me, talks about the testament of the history. The resiliency, the fact that you might burn our houses down, but we will rebuild. We will not do it within a happy demeanor, but we're going to rebuild our community as a statement of how strong we are. And I can only imagine, I live with my brother, his kids, and his wife. If somebody would have came to my house and did similar actions, that going forth, one, it wouldn't be something that I would be really happy to talk about, but then two, it wouldn't be a statement, a social statement that I would have been happy about as well. So we didn't want to have smiles within us, but we did want to have a facial expression of resilience, of somewhat confrontation, of saying that, we will continue. It's like we will continue against all odds. It's like our neighborhood has been torn down, but here we are, and we will continue with life. The way that life goes on.
Is there
Yeah, Lily.
is there any significance or meaning to one of you having a bow tie and the other having a tie?
It's got different flavors. Some people rock bow ties, some people rock. No, it truly is. It references duality. We function as, in some instances, guardians, as watchmen, as protectors, as of history of culture and society. But a lot of the work we try to not change our expression regardless of where we are. So we've taken photographs all over, but we try to stay static. So if time, as anything else, in time changes and environments change, people change, but we try to symbolically be as stiff and as static and as timeless as possible.
And if you look at the slides, which you can't see right now, but you will after a while, it was something about the way they displayed their bodies as actual artifacts that made me resonate towards what Living Arts is all about, which is connecting performance art together with exhibits and life. And so the embracing of the community with what they do, to me, was really the art form. These are the souvenirs from the art form of them going around and really talking to people and gathering this information. But we need souvenirs. We need souvenirs to be able to actually remind us and to challenge us and to, make us think. And especially the workshop that they did, and we haven't talked about that much, but I hope you do talk about it a little bit with the sculpture. Really resonated with me with the piece they had in Philly. So I also want to really say a big shout out to, this could not have happened without Shunsuke Manabe, who really is the director of the Artist in Residence program. These guys came without any money. We had no money to give them other than a place to stay and basically a place to work. And Shun has been really helpful also in bringing them around. And this is the kind of empowerment that an artist in residency program can actually provide to a community and make them think. And I hope this thing will grow. I'm embarrassed as hell that we weren't able to actually afford, to be able to pay their way here and food. But it's a start, and I'm hoping that over time we'll be able to really grow this thing. And if you'd like to help, then I'm really willing to listen to you.
The cost is so big. I got a family and wife, and these young two are more single than I am. But we raised money to be here because we wanted to be here, and we thought it was a great opportunity, and not only to make art, but to express and tell the story of Tulsa. So we came on our own accord. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say, my name is James Johnson. I've been a resident here 50 years. And first let me say, welcome to Tulsa. We really appreciate you all for taking the time to do this, to come on your own accord. One thing that I would like for you all to do before you do leave the city, I know you said that you've been traveling around on bicycles. I work with Pastor Melvin Cooper, who is doing a great work in the community at World One for Christ. In fact, we just opened up a family fun center in North Tulsa, the only family fun center in North Tulsa for quite some time. I don't know if you guys have gotten a chance to get by there, but it's at 5424 North Madison, right off the corner of 54th and North Peoria. If you get a chance, if you've heard of Dave & Buster's, if you've heard of Incredible Pizza, all of these types of places, that's what it's compared to in North Tulsa. So I want you guys to make sure that you get by there to see that. And then the other thing that I would love for you all to do before you leave Tulsa, go by and see B.C. Franklin Park, Ben Hill Park, and Springdale Park. And when you get through seeing those three parks in North Tulsa, then I would like for you to go by and see Hella Park and any other park in South Tulsa. Now, if you guys don't have a way to get around,
We got a car.
because I drive a church van, I'll make sure that you get there. But I want you guys, I want you to get a complete feel of what's going on in our city. We've come a long way, but we still got a long ways to go.
No, the disparity amongst the communities that we've noticed in our small amount of travels is really night and day. And to me, when you talk about a tragedy, I think the trajectory of what Greenwood was and rebuilt what it became again, but what it could have been when you start talking about one of the best black surgeons or doctors in the country being killed in an event. You know, when you rebuild and someone like that is lost, you don't rebuild with that person going forward. You know, and you know, I can only compare it to my neighborhood back then. You know, it's like it's like there's really bad neighborhoods in every city, and you know, there's a lot of love and light that needs to be shared going north. You know, and all you gotta do is take a ride, and it's obvious. All you gotta do is take a ride going north, and it's obvious. All you gotta do is take a ride going south, and see how much can be shared. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't take much to share a meal, metaphorically, and you know, construction and some of this redevelopment can be going on in a number of other places. You know what I mean? And you know, I hope that seems like the city's in a point of rebuilding and vibrancy. I just hope that goes in every direction. You know what I mean? You know, not just north, but east as well, west. You know, I've heard there's some bad communities out in the east and west, and you know, it's like you don't realize how effectful these communities are until it spills over lines, and then people wonder why me on the other side. You know, and so like that happens when you have people who are hungry, when you have no education, and when you have no jobs. You know, usually people steal because they have to. You know what I mean? And usually people sell things because they have to. You know, so my neighborhood actually looks a lot more bleak than what I saw on the north side, because on the north side, at least there's grass in the front of your house and in the back. You know what? And when you live on a block of row houses where you're the only house on with the lights on the block, and the rest are either condemned or filled with crack participants, you know, there's something very depriving about that. You know what I mean? And you know, it's like, you know, what we got to do is just come together and have this conversation, like how we move forward.
Yeah.
What made you want to come to Tulsa?
You know what? You know, it's funny. You know, the reality is that for me, the story of Tulsa is not that different than the stories of Detroit, the stories of Philadelphia. And I grew up in LA, Detroit, and actually, you know, now I'm in Philadelphia. But those disparities that we're talking about exist all over the country and all over the world. And you know, what drew us in here is because stories are actually part of our realities. You know, in the city of Philadelphia, that disparity. I'm sure the sister from Mount Airy can testify. If you go down the street called Germantown Ave, right? You take that drive. You start off in Center City, and you go all the way through to Chestnut Hill. It's pretty profound. And you know, and I think as a young person, I was always conscious of that and sensitive to it. And so when you start to hear of the history, the disparity, and the reality of today, you know, it's not just about an incident that happened to me.
Had you heard of this history before?
6 months ago, I have not heard of it, to be honest with you. And you know, I think that says a lot.
It does.
The
It
legacy,
does.
the legacy of the silence.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we're really looking to do, again, not that it's our story to tell, but is to make people on the East Coast a little bit more aware of their communal history. You know what I mean? Not just East Coast history, but our community. You know, like if we're all so proud to wave these flags, let's claim our history. You know what I mean? That's not just the history of New York, Philadelphia, LA, all these big metropolises, but the whole center of this country kind of holds us together. Talk about the wheat belt and all that. You know, it's like this area has been feeding damn near the world for a long time. And you know, we all have a history to share. at the end of the day. And, again, us as artists, part of the root of us as public artists is that we take it upon ourselves to work with the people who don't have the same level of education, the people who don't have the same level of opportunities, the people who won't take it upon their time on Sunday to go to the Philbrook or any other museum just because it's not a place of comfort that seems invited to them. You know what I mean?
Labor welfare, yeah.
And what we want to do is, I think creativity is something that should be shared by all. Because if you don't have that spectrum of thought, creativity is a powerful thing. If you don't have that spectrum of thought, you're kind of limited in life. And it's interesting when you think about it that, different national programs, we talk about education, these are the first things that are getting cut. If you take away creativity and art, theater, and music from our youth, and you take away gym class, it's like, what are you expecting to produce as a result? You know what I mean? What exactly are you expecting to produce? So us as a collective, we take it upon ourselves. Like this is only my second or third gallery show, because I do public art because I want, in reality, people to be able to go and have this piece of art that I poured my heart into in their community, that they could just leave their door, go to the bus stop, and they'll see it in passing. They'll see it in passing. They don't have to go out of their way to experience culture. And as a collective, we take it upon ourselves to do that. We take it upon ourselves to raise money to teach a class within a school that doesn't have an art class, just because those kids need it just like anybody else.
Actually in awe because I am from Philadelphia. I came here in the 6th grade and I grew up in Mount Airy, 8415 Tickery. I went to school in Germantown. So when you said that, I was just like, wow. But my question is, thank you for coming too as well. But I want to know all the information that you guys have gathered, especially reading the articles from Leroy Chapman. I know you guys know who Tate Brady was. How do you all feel about this district being named after someone who did all those things to help segregate North Tulsa? I am with the Coalition of Social Justice, and we are fighting to change the name, not to rewrite the history. We want the history to be told in the history books. The Oklahoma Historical Society has not even recognized all the negatives about Tate Brady, but just the positives. So we want it in the history books, but we don't want to honor that name. And I always tell people we still have survivors who are alive today who look at this booming district and they see their name, Tate Brady. So how do you all feel about that? About renaming or rebranding the Brady district?
Oh, you want to look at me? Go for it.
Good question.
It's really hard for us to, formulate an opinion because we don't live here, but
you don't have to, because knowing
Right.
all the information you gathered and learned.
Yeah.
Right is right.
It's been
Yeah,
an
right is
interesting
right.
discovery.
Yeah.
We didn't know the history, and then we read the articles, and so I don't want to speak for all of us, but me personally.
And just to be respectful to them, and no disrespect to you at all. I think if you look at the art and just, that's what art should do. It's like, I don't know if putting them on the spot, and trying to win favor or not, really is that's, I just want to chime in on that because I don't think that I want to respect their work and what they came here
Oh,
and did.
I respect it. I do. I really don't think I do. I respect you guys and your work and what you're doing. I just always like to get other people's opinions.
I mean, through conversation, we've heard both sides, you know, and we've learned the history of Tate Brady, been through Brady Heights. It's funny that you have two different areas named after the same man.
Oh, it's more than that.
And ultimately, you know, you talk about the other comparable quote-unquote founding fathers and speak on, you know, I don't know if you've been back to Philly recently, but they did, and this is a great example, you know, George Washington, our first president. They recently rebuilt the White House, the first one, you know, where he lived. And it's on Market Street. It's a building without a roof, and it's a multimedia experience. In renovating this house, they found his slave quarters, which were underground, underneath his house. Now, they tried to cover that up.
They didn't want to discover them.
They did not.
They didn't want to find them.
They did not want to talk about this too publicly, but some organizations locally were like, no, we're talking about history. We're talking about this. You know, like, so they raised the momentum to, all right, we're building this multi-million-dollar complex that's honoring George Washington's first house. Y'all found his slave quarters which were underneath his house at the time. We need to show that too. And so what they did, and to me it's the most profound part of this piece of public art that they created, they brought in archaeologists and, you know, showed the foundations of the rooms, and, you know, definitely very small rooms, you know, and so you go down there now, and it's this big glass encasing. You got the full house in the front, and then you got this big glass encasing. And you look down on his former slave quarters, and they talk about the whole history of what slaves George Washington had, our first president. Are we going to knock down the Washington Monument? I doubt it. You know, me personally, you know, I'll go out on a limb and say, hey, I would love for this area to be called the Greenwood Arts District. You know, I think that would be a start. You gotta start somewhere as a point to rebuild. You know what I mean? For Greenwood to not only reclaim part of this community instead of being pushed away, you know, is a powerful statement. You know, a lot of people don't know, and, you know, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Leroy Chapman, but Cincinnati was the border of Greenwood. You know, it's like most people would not honor that or know about it today. You know, that's right next to Guthrie Green. That's where, you know, part of this whole revival is. You know, I think the name of...
What does Greenwood symbolize? What's that name?
Yeah, what's it named? I heard it was named after.
It's what they
Name
call
Greenwood came from.
cognitive dissonance, and it's a separation from the actual issue at hand. You know, and that's to say, oh, this is what they did, or this is what they did. If you look at Tulsa specifically, and the history of Tate Brady, and the history of Greenwood, and what has occurred here with the historic registry districting of the Brady district, and this building in particular being included in the Brady district when it's in historic Greenwood, and that was done so the renovation on this building could get federal tax credits, okay, which makes economic sense. But economic sense doesn't always speak to social justice. And in Tulsa, we have a situation that occurred that wiped out the wealth of the most affluent African American community. And no justice has ever been done.
That's right.
Period. You can give them medals, you can negotiate like Reuben Gant did with the ballpark. That's supposed to be promoted as Greenwood. And in the building of that, he had he wanted these medallions made that said, you know, facing north, so you can't even see them. And this is the continuation of the history that is conjured whenever you say the name Brady. Brady after the riot, was part of a group that tried to push the African Americans north and east. So when Brady's name takes 2 blocks of historic Greenwood, its history, is repeating itself. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So I don't care where Greenwood's name came from. They obviously, if that was a slave trader's name or whatever, it was reclaimed in 1908 when O.W. Gurley established Greenwood here.
That's right.
If you got, let me cut you off.
Yeah, like that kind of like distraction from the conversation
I
is.
wasn't trying to distract, I was curious, because I'm sure whenever we started calling it the Brady's Art
I'm
District, no
speaking-
one was trying to say, oh, let's name it after someone who was.
No, but it was known by the people that paid for the proposal. And
Yeah.
it was absolutely known.
At that time.
Yeah, and the issue had come up before, and there was an effort to try and change
Well,
the
that's why I was
name.
just asking about Greenwood, because you don't want to repeat history.
Yeah, I mean, I want to thank her for bringing up the question. If you guys are curious about what our perspective collectively on is and sort of what's happened here, turn to the art. The art speaks for us. So if you're really interested in sort of what I feel, what he feels, what she feels about what's going on, just look at the work. Go tell me.
And ultimately, in our approach to creativity, we didn't want to jump into the political debate. Now you can say that us being here is a part of that, but
I'll be happy to.
Not second.
ultimately, we came here to research and then create. We're not here to kind of take sides or because I think a lot of people everybody has their own perspective, and in their seat, their personal seat, they think that perspective is right, and you can never tell them that it's not because it's theirs. But again, we're guests here in this town, so there's a story and a history that's not necessarily our own, although it is, but we've never really lived here before.
This might be
Yes. How close was some of the activity did you get out of that, and what led you there?
Clinker brick from Leroy, and I'm an artist and I've worked in sculpture and clay for a long time, and I've never seen brick that is melted into itself. And I think that speaks on the level of heat and fire involved with whatever caused it to be there. And then we heard about it, the cemetery from Yabanzi, and he recommended us to go and check it out because of these towers that were created, and we saw the front of the building over on Greenwood and near Archer. And again, our path so far has been one where I talk to you, you tell me to talk to Hannibal, and then I go and talk to Hannibal, and then Hannibal tells me about a location, and then I go there. It's been like very organic piecemeal. We hear about towers that were built from the cast off and burnt bricks that were the result of this massacre. And in my creative process, I need to go there and see that. So we went up there, we're extremely moved, and just the presence of those towers and what they're made of, I think tells a story a lot in and of itself. When people want to say, it's like, let's move on, let's get past this, it's like, let's go and look at those towers and then have a conversation. It's like, how does brick melt into itself, to the ground, and so it was an extremely moving experience, unlike probably one I've ever had, to go there and just see the restructuring of brick from a community that had been burnt to the ground.
I believe we got 5 minutes left for this conversation.
Yeah, well, first is an announcement. The piece of art that is against that west wall is a piece that the collective did with rubbings, and it happens to have the Brady name upside down, which I'm sure is a secret evocation of the destruction of what has been. But the artist said they would like to leave that here as a gift to Tulsa. I think it's in the right place, but if you have, the piece on the big white piece, the huge piece, and please, the wall. Yeah, please go around there and see it if you haven't seen it. And if you have ideas about where it might go or where it might visit, and you have some strong bodies, that's part of their gift to the city of Tulsa. But the other thing, part of Crown Hill Cemetery, and if there's a statement behind your question, I encourage you to make it to the artist when you go. I recommend the Crown Hill Cemetery. It's number one, a part of the poem that I read, the acknowledgement that the dead are not dead. You can hear the dead scream. You can hear the dead talking down here. You can hear the music down here. You can feel it in the experience that drives a journalist and artist to do things. So, and there's no sign. There's not a sign on Highway 75 that will say Crown Hill Cemetery established 1907 to get off it's part of the silence. So I recommend that they go out there. My mother left there's a place waiting for me out there. We buried our father there more than 50 years ago, and hundreds of people, that's a sacred place. So partly it was sending into a sacred place. We said we have 5 minutes left. I'm really interested, though, in what you said about your art and making the art, and how you didn't want to capture smiles. When I put myself in Philadelphia, if you were to take this back to Philadelphia, and I went to the exhibit, I'm trying to say, what would I think about Tulsa, and why isn't there a smile? Now that's me. I'm not saying you needed to change your art, but I wonder, why isn't there a smile in it? So, and you said you want art to speak the truth. I'm asking you, as a young person in Philadelphia, what is the truth that you discovered here? What is the truth in your art? And anything you want to say about how it affected you as an artist?
I'll put in my 2 cents on that one. That's a great question. You can't come to a place like Tulsa, experience what we've experienced for the last few weeks, and not take it with you, for the rest of your life. You can't shake it off. And so, we brought a little bit of Philly with us when we came here, and we're going to take a little bit of Tulsa when we leave. And it's going to continue in the work as long as we continue to make it. Just speaking specifically on the piece in the back, for me, that's a very powerful piece. We took these rubbings of Greenwood area churches, the cemetery, and tried to sort of capture the essence of what once was and document it, and then reconstruct it and put the pieces back together. And symbolically, in a lot of ways, this area is torn apart and needs to be brought back together. And so that work sort of speaks to that specifically. Deborah, did you want to say something about that?
I wanted to thank you guys because I'm a native Tulsa. I was born and raised here. My grandmother and my aunt were raised by survivors. And I want to thank you for taking the time to go to the places and to talk to us and to get our stories, to get a full understanding of what's going on rather than just doing some surface stuff like some people do. They just, they go by what they've read or heard and not actually talking to the people who grew up here in this environment. I want to thank you.
Here.
Alan?
Yes,
Please.
sorry. Yes,
I love the art form. I took the poster home that you all gave me, and it's been, I've been going back and forth. I wrote down some questions at home, and then I said, well, I'm not going to say anything, but it really feels haunting. I found out about the Greenwood, the destruction about 8 years ago, and I've never, I've been to many gatherings where they have talked about Greenwood, but it's, in my mind, it's always been something thriving, and I visualize something good, and then when I see this, it's a different spin. So I was downtown having dinner, and everything in the Greenwood Brady district, it just feels haunted. Like, it's like, I live in a haunted city, and prior to this, I never felt that way. So, your art form for me, is that what it is? Okay. So that's kind of what I've got out of it. At first I thought it was negative, but I guess, is it a positive?
Yes,
Okay.
and it will be
Okay.
until they straighten it out.
Okay.
Yeah, you gonna feel that.
Well,
until they
I
do
just
the right
want to
thing.
say thanks to you guys. I mean, it's terrific that you came here on your own nickel, and that essentially this is a kind of strange combination of an artistic project and a kind of investigative entrepreneurialism, really. But I guess the question I wanted to ask was, you guys come from Philadelphia, which in 1985 was bombed from the air. And your police chief, they were bombing the headquarters of the group organization, were they not? So there's a real connection between some of your history and our own history here, isn't there?
Well, the people have come to us and said, this is the only place that the city ever took upon itself to bomb its own people. So, sign up that. It's like actually a more recent history. If anybody doesn't know, they have a video of it, of a helicopter dropping a firebomb on the move compound, in which the police and fire stood by and watched it burn to the ground with children within the compound. And they're a progressive group. They had similar affiliations to the Black Panthers or whatever you might want to call but and since being here, you talk about truth and inspiration. That has in part inspired me. I'm like, well, why am I not doing this to my own city? It's like we have something similar there, and there, just like Greenwood, there's been art projects designated to move, but I guess it's just how you go about it and what you put together. So it's like, my mind is on kind of that, going back and kind of looking back into that history. Yes.
We have one more hand on the back.
Yes, this was made by you and others in the room. So unlike other sculptures that you might know, this is definitely the sculptural pieces are touchworthy. And just a side note on this piece in the middle, baseballs are included in that because of the story of them finding body parts and not trying to really make that public knowledge when they were building the stadium, and kind of put that together.
There was one more hand on the back row. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Please.
I was just wondering, Linda, if you ever feature yourself in any of this type of work?
No, this is a continuation of a body of work that is being projected on this wall, so you'll see it when we turn the lights out. And I wasn't the photographer on that series. Kieran Darnell asked me to come here, so I've been working with the collective for the past year. So no, I'm not in this series, and I don't think I'll be in any future series, but I don't know.
And that's in no way a downplay, because although our voices might be louder and our images might be up front, a lot of the creative threads and thoughts behind this are rooted to this young lady to the left. So if anything, ask her more questions than us, because Renelle's been here for a week, and really I've been following Linda Lee. I just have a big mouth.
Thank you all.
This piece is titled, We're Still Here. All right. Everybody say it again.